And so we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine, nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story. A story about a baker, in a time long past, whose entire world rested on a simple loaf of bread. As you begin to settle, just one gentle thought. If this space feels like a comfort to you, you might consider a soft tap on the like or subscribe button. But only if that thought feels as effortless as a quiet breath, and if you feel so inclined, you could even leave a quiet comment, letting me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's a nice way to feel connected in this quiet, shared space. But these are just whispers, suggestions that can float away. Your rest is what matters. All right, let the shadows in your room grow long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing, and together, let's allow the story to begin. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not a biting, aggressive cold, but a deep, seeping chill that lives in the stone floor. It climbs up from the soles of your feet as you swing your legs out from under the coarse wool blanket. Your world, for now, is a small dark room, and the only light is the faint grey promise of a dawn that is still an hour or more away. You don't need the sun to wake up. Your clock is alive. It's the smell that truly pulls you from the last vestiges of sleep. It's a smell that's so familiar you barely notice it most days, but in the pre-dawn stillness, it's the king of this small kingdom. It's the scent of yeast, a tangy, sour, living aroma that seems to breathe in the corner of the room. It's the smell of your livelihood, the smell of your past, and, you hope, the smell of your past. This is your bakery in medieval Paris, a city that is still mostly asleep around you. You move through the darkness with a practiced familiarity, your hands finding the flint and steel on the small wooden table without your eyes needing to look. They spark, a puff of breath on the tinder, and a single candle flame springs to life, casting huge, dancing shadows that make the small room feel like a cavern. The single room behind your shop is your entire home. It holds your narrow bed, a wooden chest, and a few pegs on the wall for your clothes. It's simple. In the flickering light, you see your real master, waiting for you in a large clay crock. The leaven, the mother dough. It's this bubbling, living culture of flour and water that gives your bread its rise and its flavor. It's a legacy passed down from the baker who taught you, who got it from his master before that. You feed it a meal of fresh flour and water, stirring it with a wooden paddle. The work of the day has officially begun, and you haven't even thought about a single customer yet. Because in this world, bread is not just food. That's a modern, simplistic way of looking at it. Here, bread is life itself. It's what people use as a plate, a thick slice called a trencher that soaks up the juices from their thin stew. It's what they are paid in when coin is scarce. It is the one thing, more than anything else, that separates a good day from a terrible one, a full belly from the gnawing emptiness of hunger. The responsibility of creating it well, sits on your shoulders every morning, heavier than any sack of flour. You move into the bakery proper, the stone-lined oven still holding a faint, residual warmth from yesterday's bake. You begin the slow, rhythmic work of mixing. Water from the bucket, flour from the sack, salt from a small wooden box, and a large scoop of the now awakened leaven. Your arms and back already know the movements. The push, the fold, the turn. It's a dance you do every single morning. As the dough starts to come together, a sticky, unwieldy mass, you reach for a small, carved wooden stamp resting on a nearby shelf. It has a simple design on it, a sheaf of wheat tied with a ribbon. This is your baker's mark, a peculiar little invention of the time, born of pride and paranoia. Every loaf that leaves your oven will be stamped with this mark. It tells the world, I made this is my work. It's a guarantee of quality. An undeniable admission of responsibility should anything be wrong. The flour you use is a mix of wheat and dry, what's known as maslin. It makes a hearty, brownish loaf that your customers can afford. Historians, for their part, still debate just what the average person's loaf was truly made of. The records from the period are often vague, mentioning only flour or grain, leaving scholars to argue whether the commoner's diet was based on fine wheat like the nobility, coarse and heavy rye, or a pragmatic, shifting blend of whatever the harvest and the economy allowed. For you, it's simple. You use what you can get, and you make it the best you can. As you cover the massive trough of dough with a damp cloth, leaving it to begin its slow, magical rise in the cool air, you stand for a moment in the near-total silence. The only sounds are the gentle hiss of the candle and the quiet bubbling of the leaven in its pot. The city has not yet stirred. But in this quiet moment, there's a pressure you can feel in the air, a sense of rules and standards that exist outside your walls, watching you even when you are completely alone. That pressure you can feel in the quiet air, that sense of being watched even when you're alone, it has a name. It's not the king, who is a distant, almost mythical figure concerned with wars and taxes on a grand scale. It's not even the church, whose authority feels spiritual and eternal. No, this is a power far more immediate, far more intimate. It's the guild. The Guild of Bread Makers. A name that sounds respectable, even cozy, but which you know to be a web of rules and obligations as complex and binding as a spider's silk. Think of it as a strange and potent combination of a modern trade union, a government regulatory agency, and a very, very nosy neighborhood watch. To be a baker in this city, you must belong to the guild. There is no alternative. It's not a choice. It's not a choice. It's a condition of existence. They taught you your craft. They tested you on your skills before you could call yourself a master, and they granted you the right to open this very shop. In that way, the guild is your protector, your professional family. It ensures that some untrained amateur can't just set up a shoddy oven next door, sell cheap, terrible bread, and undercut you, driving you out of business. It ensures a certain standard, a stability to the market. But that protection comes at a price, and the price is control. The guild controls everything. They set the price of bread, linking it directly to the price of grain in a complex, sliding scale called the assize. You can't just decide to have a sale one afternoon. You can't charge a bit more if you think your loaf is better than your neighbor's. The price is the price. They control the source of your flour, often directing you to buy from specific mills or merchants to ensure quality and prevent creative additions. And most importantly, they control the quality of the product itself. Their standards are not suggestions, they are law. The weight of a standard loaf is decreed, down to the ounce. Its color, its texture, its crumb, all of it is subject to the guild's approval. And you know that at any time, two of the guild masters, usually older, stern-faced men whose own baking days are long behind them, could be walking through the market, picking a loaf from a stall at random, weighing it right there on their own set of brass scales. You've seen it happen. You've seen the look on a baker's face when his loaf comes up short. And the rules, oh, the rules are endless. Some are practical, like the ones about keeping your shop clean and your weights accurate. But others are peculiar. For instance, there's a strict rule against baking at night. This might sound strange, since you're here working in the pre-dawn gloom. But that rule isn't really about the time of day. It's about fire and fraud. In a city built of wooden thatch, an unattended oven in the dead of night is a terrifying risk. The guild also believes that darkness is a cloak for dishonesty. A baker working by candlelight might be tempted to mix cheaper ingredients into his flour, bean meal or worse, chalk dust, knowing no one can see him clearly. The official baking must be done in the honest light of day. Your work now, the mixing and the rising, this is the preparation. The true bake comes with the sun. It's a small, technical distinction, but in the world of the guild, such distinctions are everything. Historians in the distant future will argue endlessly about the true nature of medieval guilds. Were they noble institutions that protected consumers and maintained high standards of craftsmanship? Or were they restrictive monopolies that stifled competition, prevented innovation, and served only to enrich their own senior members? The truth, as is often the case, is probably somewhere in the middle. But for you, standing here in the cool air of your shop, it's not an academic debate. It's your life. The guild is both your shield and your cage. It's the reason you have a business, and it is the single most powerful entity that could take that business away from you in a heartbeat. You walk over to the damp cloth. Peeking under the damp cloth, you see that the dough has transformed. It has swelled to nearly double its size, a pale, living pillow that fills the wooden container. It's ready. You sprinkle a bit of flour on your hands and plunge your fists directly into its center. The dough gives way with a soft, satisfying sigh, the captured air releasing in a gentle whoosh. The sound is almost human, a quiet exhalation in the silent room. You begin the process of knocking it back, folding and pressing it, preparing to divide it into the individual loaves that will, with any luck, see you safely through another day under the watchful eyes of your brothers in the guild. With the dough now tamed and ready, you begin the delicate process of division. You are no longer just a mixer of ingredients, you are a sculptor, a mathematician of the most primal kind. You haul the heavy, elastic mass onto a large wooden table, its surface pale and smooth from years of use, dusted with a fine layer of flour that looks like a fresh snowfall. Your hands, guided by a sense of touch that is more reliable than sight, begin to work the dough, cutting off chunks with a dull metal scraper. Each piece must become a pain deliverer, the standard 1-pound loaf. But here lies the strange alchemy of baking, a bit of arcane knowledge every baker understands. You don't cut a 1-pound piece of dough. You have to account for the baker's dozen. This is a concept that will survive for centuries, but its origin is right here, in your cautious, slightly fearful world. To ensure that every single loaf sold is at or above the legally mandated weight after it has been baked and has lost moisture to the oven's heat, you always add a little extra. For every 12 loaves you intend to sell, you bake a 13th. This extra loaf is your insurance policy against the guild's scales. Some bakers, like you, will divide that 13th loaf's worth of dough among the other 12, making each one a little heavier. Others will literally throw in a small extra roll loaf with every dozen sold. It's a form of self-preservation disguised as generosity. The pressure to get this right is immense. The perfect loaf is not just a matter of pride, it's a matter of survival. The bread must have a good of unspring, rising proudly and not slumping into a dense, flat disk. The crust must be a deep, satisfying brown, not pale and anemic, and certainly not scorched black. It must add a satisfying crackle when tapped. When sliced, the inside, the crumb, must be even unfull small holes, not a solid, gluey mass. You imagine the guild masters in your mind's eye. A pair of sour-faced men breaking one of your loaves in half, peering at it with cold, critical eyes, rubbing the crumb between their thumb and forefinger. You shape each piece of dough with swift, practiced motions. A fold, a tuck, a roll. You are creating tension on the surface of the dough, giving it a smooth skin that will capture the steam and allow it to expand perfectly in the oven's blast furnace heat. Each shaped loaf is placed carefully on a long wooden peel, a giant flat paddle that you will use to slide them into the fiery heart of the oven. Before they go in, you take your small and stamp, the one with the sheaf of wheat, and press it firmly into the top of each one. Your signature, your promise. This entire system of marking bread is a surprisingly sophisticated piece of early consumer protection. It's a form of traceability. If a customer buys a loaf that is underweight, moldy, or filled with, say, dust from the mill floor, they don't just have to grumble about it. They can look at the mark, identify the baker, and lodge a formal complaint with the guild. It takes the anonymous act of buying a daily staple and makes it a transaction of personal responsibility. For honest bakers like you, it's a mark of quality. For the dishonest, it's a signature on a confession. There's a strange little fact, a quirk of history that academics still puzzle over. Sometimes these bakers' marks were not just symbols, but were incredibly elaborate, almost like tiny, edible coats of arms. Archaeologists have found ancient Roman bread from Pompeii, preserved in ash, with stamps that not only identified the baker, but also the quality of the bread or where it was intended to be distributed, like for the military or for a specific temple. It's part of a tradition that is thousands of years old. The idea of holding the person who makes your food accountable is not a modern invention. As you finish stamping the last loaf, you can see the sky outside your small, high window beginning to change. The deep, inky black is softening to a bruised purple, and the first true light of day is approaching. It's almost time. You open the heavy iron door of the oven, and a wave of dry, Intense heat washes over your face, making you squint. It smells of hot stone, old smoke, and the ghosts of 1,000 bakes past. Using the long wooden peel, you begin to slide the loaves into the oven's mold, arranging them quickly and efficiently on the hot stone floor. Once the last one is in, you slam the door shut, enclosing them in the roaring darkness. Now you wait. This is the most nerve-wracking part of the day. The mixing and shaping, you can control. But what happens in the oven, that is a matter of fire, faith, and a little bit of magic. While the bread is in the oven, locked in its fiery transformation, you cannot rest. This is the small window of time you have to prepare for the day's other great challenge, the market. You quickly wipe down your wooden table, sweeping the excess flour into a small bin, and then you turn your attention to the front of your shop. It's not much more than a small room with a wide open window that has a thick wooden shutter. You swing this shutter open, propping it up to create a simple counter facing the narrow, muddy street. The sun is just beginning to cast its first watery, golden rays over the rooftops of Paris, and the city is stirring to life like a great groaning beast. The silence of your prud'homme work is shattered by a symphony of sounds, the rumble of wooden cart wheels on cobblestones, the distant rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the crowing of a rooster from a nearby yard, and the rising murmur of human voices. You are no longer in your private sanctuary, you are part of the city's sprawling, chaotic metabolism. You take a moment to arrange the few loaves you saved from yesterday's bake on the counter. Day-old bread is sold at a discount, a perfectly legal and guild-approved practice, as long as it's clearly advertised as such. As you work, the air begins to fill with the smells of the awakening city, a complex and often overwhelming perfume. There's the sharp, earthy tang of damp straw and animal dung from the street, the scent of wood smoke from 100 breakfast fires, and the faint, sweet smell of river water from the not-so-distant Seine. And then from your own shop, the king of all smells begins to emerge. The rich, nutty, almost caramel-like aroma of baking bread. It pours out of your window and into the street, a silent, invisible advertisement more powerful than any town crier. It's a smell that promises comfort, warmth, and sustenance. It's the smell of civilization. Your first few customers are regulars. A sleepy-eyed servant from a wealthy merchant's house sent to fetch the morning's bread. A mason on his way to a construction site, looking for a cheap, day-old loan for his midday meal. The transactions are quick, familiar. A few coins dropped onto the counter, a loaf passed back, but soon, the market proper will open, and the real chaos will begin. If you want to sell the bulk of your bread, you can't just wait for people to come to your window. You have to take your product to them. You load the freshly baked loaves, now a beautiful golden brown and smelling divine, into 2 large wicker baskets. Hoisting one onto each arm is a familiar balancing act. You lock your shop door and join the river of people flowing towards the central market square. Navigating this space is a full-body experience. You are squeezed and jostled on all sides. The noise is a constant deafening roar of vendors shouting their wares, customers haggling, children crying, and dogs barking. You have to watch your step constantly, avoiding piles of discarded vegetable scraps, puddles of unidentifiable liquid, and the ever-present muck that coats the ground. It's a sensory assault. Your nose is bombarded by the sweet smell of rotting fruit from the grocer's stall, the sharp, metallic tang of the butcher's bloody apron, and the overpowering, eye-watering stench of the fishmonger, whose wares had been sitting in the sun for just a little too long. Here in the market, you see the guild system in its full, glorious, and sometimes terrifying expression. Every trade is confined to its own area. The candle makers, with their waxy, honey-scented stalls, are clustered together. The weavers, with their bolts of rough woolen linen, occupy another row. This segregation was, in theory, for the convenience of the customer. But it was also a tool of control for the guilds, making it incredibly easy for them to monitor their members' check prices and ensure no one was stepping outside their prescribed lane. The idea that a baker might also try to sell, say, a few simple meat pies was a scandalous violation of the Butchers' Guild's territory, and it would be dealt with swiftly. One of the strangest examples of this hyper-specialization, a detail that many historians marvel at, is the division within the food guilds themselves. There were separate, often rival, guilds for roasters, pastry makers, and sorters. A man who was licensed to roast a goose was legally forbidden from making the sauce to go with it. That was the domain of another professional entirely. It seems absurd to a modern mind, but it was the very fabric of this economic world, a system designed to prevent anyone from accumulating too much power or to diverse a skill set. You find your usual spot among the other bakers, a noisy, flour-dusted corner of the square. You set down your baskets and begin your own sales pitch, your voice joining the chorus. You are just one baker among many, your stamped loaves a small offering in a sea of bread, hoping that your quality, your reputation, and the irresistible smell of your work will be enough to carry you through another profitable and uneventful day. As you stand at your stall, hawking your loaves and making change, your eyes and ears are always open. The market is not just a place of commerce, it's the city's central nervous system, the place where news, gossip, and warnings travel faster than a royal messenger. You learn to read the subtle currents of the crowd, to listen to the snippets of conversation that drift by on the noisy air. Today, there's a strange energy in the square. A little knot of people is gathered near the center, their attention fixed on the pillory. The pillory, or the stocks as it's sometimes called, is a grim piece of civic furniture. It's a simple wooden structure, to heavy planks with holes for a person's head and hands, set on a raised platform, so that everyone can get a good look. Most days it stands empty, a silent wooden warning, but today it is occupied. From your position you can't see the poor soul's face clearly, but you can see the posture of shame, the slumped shoulders, the bowed head. You see other merchants pointing, and children, emboldened by the crowd, occasionally throwing a piece of mud or a rotten cabbage core in the prisoner's direction. A guard stands nearby looking bored, his presence meant less to protect the prisoner and more to ensure they don't somehow escape their public ordeal. What did he do? You ask the baker at the next stall, a gruff, older man named Thomas whose hands are permanently stained with flour. Thomas doesn't even look up from arranging his own loaves. The wine seller from Rue Neuve, he grunts. Caught him mixing river water with his cheapest stock. Again, you nod slowly. It's a classic, foolish crime. A desperate attempt to stretch a product, to make a few extra coins. And it always ends the same way. Public humiliation. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. They are the dark fables of your world, cautionary tales whispered in workshops and taverns. The butcher who was caught trying to pass off old mutton as young lamb, sentenced to sit in the pillory with a piece of the stinking meat tied around his neck, forced to smell its decay for a full day under the hot sun. The tailor whose seams were found to be weak, made to stand in the town square wearing the poorly made shirt, while the town crier announced his shoddy workmanship to the four winds. These punishments weren't about simple justice. They were a form of theater. They were designed to inflict a wound far deeper than a fine could manage, the wound of shame. Then the bakers, oh, the bakers have their own special hell. You recall a story from a few years back about a man in a neighboring town. He was found guilty of selling underweight loaves. His punishment was not the pillory, but something uniquely cruel and fitting. They took his entire batch of fraudulent bread, tied it to a rope, and hung it around his neck like a monstrous necklace. Then they strapped him to a wooden sled, a simple plank of wood, and dragged him through every street and alley of the town. The rough ground tore at his clothes and skin, while the townspeople jeered and pointed not just at him, but at the symbol of his failure, the very bread he had tried to cheat them with. These stories serve a purpose. They are the guild's ghost stories meant to keep you and every other artisan in line. They remind you that you are not just accountable to your customers but to the entire community. Your reputation is not your own private possession, it's a public trust. And if you break that trust, the community itself, with the full backing of the guild and the city authorities, will be the instrument of your punishment. There is a fascinating and somewhat grim debate among legal historians about the true purpose of these public shaming rituals. Was it truly about deterring crime through fear? Or was it more about social cohesion, a way for the community to collectively reaffirm its values by ritually casting out and punishing a transgressor? In a world without widespread literacy, without newspapers or mass communication, a public punishment was a living, breathing sermon. It was a visceral lesson in civic morality that no one who witnessed it would ever forget. It was, in its own brutal way, a form of public education. You look back towards the pillory at the wine cellar enduring his ordeal. A profound sense of vulnerability washes over you. The line between you, a respected master baker, and him, a public disgrace, feels terrifyingly thin. It's a line that is measured in ounces of flour, in minutes in the oven, in a single moment of carelessness or temptation. You turn back to your baskets, suddenly feeling the weight of each loaf, the heavy responsibility of your baker's mark, more acutely than ever before. You arrange your bread with extra care, making sure the best-looking loaves are at the front, a small, almost superstitious gesture to ward off the fate that has befallen the man in the center of the square. The day wears on, a blur of familiar transactions. The sun climbs higher, beating down on the market square, and your initial stock of bread begins to dwindle. It's a good day, a busy day. But with the business comes a creeping fatigue. You've been awake since well before dawn, and the hours of standing, lifting, and shouting your prices are taking their toll. Your back aches, and your mind feels a little fuzzy at the edges. It is in the state, tired and a little distracted by the constant noise of the market, that you make your mistake. It's not a grand, malicious act of fraud like the water sellers. It's not a calculated decision to cheat your customers. It's a simple, human error, born of exhaustion. Back in the bakery during a brief lull in the market's traffic, you had prepared a second, smaller batch of dough to be baked for the afternoon crowd. This is common practice, ensuring a supply of fresh bread for those on their way home from work. But in your haste to get back to your stall, you had rushed the process. You hadn't let the dough rise for quite long enough. You had misjudged the heat of the oven, which had cooled slightly since the morning's inferno. You pulled the loaves out a few minutes too early, eager to get them to the market. At a glance, they look acceptable. The crust is a little pale, perhaps, a touch lighter than your usual rich, dark brown. They don't feel quite as airy and light as they should. They are a bit dense, a bit heavy for their size. In your heart, you know they are not up to your standard. They are not the product of your best work. They are the product of a tired man in a hurry. On a normal day, you might have set this batch aside, sold them at a discount a second, or even taken them home for your own supper. But today the market is still bustling. Your morning loaves are almost gone. The desire to sell these last few loaves at full price, to make the most of a profitable day, is a powerful temptation. They're not that bad, you tell yourself. They are still edible, still nourishing. The hungry man won't notice the difference. It's a small compromise, a tiny slip in your usually impeccable standards. You load the pale, heavy loaves into your basket and carry them to the stall. This is a phenomenon that historians of craftsmanship discuss, the subtle tension between pride in one's work and the economic pressure to produce. In a guild system that officially celebrated mastery and quality above all else, the daily reality for artisans like you was often a grind. You had to produce a certain amount just to cover the cost of your flour, your firewood, and your guild fees. An unsold loaf was not just a failure of craft, it was a tangible financial loss. Small compromises were an almost inevitable part of the business. The question was always, how small is small enough to go unnoticed? There's a strange and little-known aspect to the guild's quality control that adds another layer to your risk. Some guilds employed official tasters or searchers, men whose entire job was to roam the markets and sample wares. For the ale conners, they would famously pour a bit of ale on a wooden bench, sit on it in their leather breeches, and if their breeches stuck to the bench upon standing, it meant the ale had too much sugar and was of poorer quality. While the Bakers' Guild wasn't quite so theatrical, their inspectors were known to have a ruthlessly discerning palate. They wouldn't just weigh a loaf, they might break it, smell it, and chew a piece thoughtfully, their expression unreadable, before pronouncing judgment. You pray that none of those men are wandering the market this afternoon. You place the new batch of bread on your counter, mixing them in with the last couple of your superior morning loaves. You try to put them out of your mind, to treat them as if they were perfect. You call out your prices, your voice a little less confident than it was this morning. You are no longer just a baker selling his bread. You are a man harboring a small, dense secret, hoping no one will bring it to light. The afternoon sun is beginning its long, slow descent, painting the sky in softer shades of orange and pink. The market's frantic energy has subsided into a weary, end-of-day hum. Most vendors are packing up, counting their coins, and getting ready to trudge home. You have only a few loaves left from that rushed afternoon batch. You feel a small wave of relief. You've almost done it. You've almost gotten away with your small compromise. It is then that he arrives. Your final customer of the day. HES not a familiar face. He is a large man, a stonemason by the look of his calloused hands and the fine white dust that seems permanently embedded in his clothes and eyebrows. He has a sour, impatient look on his face, the look of a man whose own day has been long and trying. He doesn't greet you, just points a thick finger at the top loaf in your basket. How much for that one? He grunts, his voice a low rumble. You tell him the standard price. He throws the exact number of coins onto your wooden counter. There is no haggling, no pleasantries. It's a transaction reduced to its barest essentials. You take his money and hand him the loaf. It's one of the pale, heavy ones. You feel a slight pang of guilt, a flicker of professional shame, but you push it down. HES a big man, he probably won't even notice the density. He'll just be glad of the substance. He takes the loaf, weighing it in one hand for a moment. His eyes narrow slightly. You feel your stomach tighten. Did he notice? But then he just tucks it under his arm, turns without another word, and disappears into the thinning crowd. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. It's done. The loaf is sold. It is no longer your problem. You begin to pack up your empty baskets. A sense of weary closure settling over you. The day is over. But the story of a loaf of bread in your world doesn't end when it's sold. Its journey has just begun. The stonemason walks home through the winding, darkening streets of Paris. He is thinking of the simple, satisfying meal that awaits him, a bowl of thin vegetable soup and a thick slice of fresh bread to soak it up. The bread is the cornerstone of this meal, the thing that will turn a meager supper into something that can truly satisfy a working man's hunger. He arrives at his small, noisy home, where his wife and children are waiting. He hands the loaf to his wife, who takes it with a nod. She places it on the table and picks up a long knife. And here, in this moment, your small, private compromise becomes a public, domestic failure. The knife doesn't slice through the bread with a satisfying crackle and a soft tear. It meets a stubborn resistance. It sinks into a dense, doughy, and unyielding mess. She has to put her weight on the knife to force it through. When she finally saws off a slice, it doesn't look right. The crumb is not light and airy. It is tight, gummy, and streaked with a pale, undercooked layer near the bottom. It looks less like bread and more like a dense, floury bread. The stonemason picks up a piece, his sour expression deepening into a scowl. He tries to tear it, but it's tough and rubbery. He puts it in his mouth and begins to chew. His chewing is slow, deliberate, and angry. It doesn't taste of the rich, nutty, slightly sour flavor of a good, long-fermented loaf. It tastes of raw flour and disappointment. This is not just a bad loaf of bread. To the stonemason, it feels like a personal insult. It's a sign of contempt. He paid good, hard-earned coin for this. He paid the full, guild-regulated price for what was supposed to be a quality product, a staple of his family's diet. And in return, he received this fraud. This is not the bread of an honest master baker. This is the bread of a cheat. The history of consumer complaints is a fascinating and often unwritten one. While we have volumes on kings and battles, the story of an ordinary person's dissatisfaction is often lost. Yet, scholars who dig through old court records and guild documents find these stories everywhere. They find records of complaints about shoes with soles made of compressed leaves instead of leather, about watered-down ale, and of course about bad bread. These were not trivial matters. Being cheated out of the value of your money could mean the difference between a full belly and a hungry one. It was a violation of the social contract, and there were official channels, slow and ponderous as they might be, to address it. The stonemason spits the mouthful of doughy bread back onto the table in disgust. His wife and children watch him, their own meager supper now ruined. The man's face, already grim from a day of hard labor, sets into a mask of cold fury. He picks up the offending loaf of bread. It feels heavy in his hand, a weapon of his own indignation. He does not shout at his wife. He does not curse his luck. He makes a decision. This baker, whoever he is, will not get away with it. You, meanwhile, are blissfully unaware of the domestic drama unfolding across the city. You have returned to your small bakery, swept the floor, and are eating your own simple meal of leftover bread from the good morning batch, dipping it into a bowl of Cheesendale soup. The day's coins are counted and tucked away in a small wooden box. A feeling of profound, bone-deep weariness has settled over you. The memory of the pale, dense sloes has faded, pushed to the back of your mind by the more immediate sensations of a warm meal and the prospect of sleep. The next morning, however, the story picks up its thread. The stonemason does not come to your shop to yell at you. He doesn't demand his money back. A modern person might expect this direct confrontation, but that is not how this world works. A personal dispute can quickly escalate, and his word against yours means little. No, he knows the proper channels. He knows where the real power lies. He takes the loaf of bread, your bread, with your faint but still legible baker's mark of a wheat sheaf stamped on its pale crust, and he goes to the hall of the Bakers' Guild. This isn't a grand, imposing building. It's likely a modest stone house, perhaps with a meeting room on the ground floor and offices above, but its lack of grandeur belies its immense authority. To a baker, this building is more intimidating than the king's castle. The stonemason enters and speaks to a clerk, a man who sits at a high desk, scribbling in a ledger with a quill pen. He presents his evidence, the dense, gummy, half-eaten loaf of bread. He states his case simply and clearly. He is not emotional or hysterical. He is a citizen lodging a formal complaint, invoking a system that he trusts, or at least, a system he knows is supposed to exist, to protect him from precisely this kind of fraud. The clerk listens impassively. He has heard this story, or variations of it, hundreds of times. He examines the loaf. He asks the stonemason a few perfunctory questions. Then, he takes out a fresh sheet of parchment and begins to write. He is creating a formal record of the complaint. He notes the date, the complainant's name, the nature of the grievance: bread of poor quality, possibly undercooked quality, possibly undercooked, and the identity of the accused baker. This act of writing it down is a crucial moment. It elevates the issue from a simple customer service complaint into a legal matter. Your name has now been entered into the Guild's official records, linked to an accusation of professional malpractice. The wheels of a slow, bureaucratic, but utterly implacable machine have just begun to turn. This process is a window into the surprisingly legalistic nature of medieval commerce. We often imagine the Middle Ages as a time of rough, informal justice, but that's not the whole picture. The guilds, in particular, were obsessed with rules, regulations, and records. They kept detailed minutes of their meetings, recorded fines, and documented every judgment. Historians who study these guild archives are often astonished by the level of detail. They find records of disputes over apprenticeships, arguments about the sourcing of raw materials, and of course a steady stream of customer complaints. These documents show a world where reputation was paramount and where formal systems were in place to police it. There's a subtle but important distinction that scholars still debate. Was this system truly designed to protect the consumer, or was it primarily to protect the guild's own collective reputation? A baker selling bad bread didn't just cheat one customer, he brought shame upon the entire profession. His actions could erode public trust, making people suspicious of all bakers. So, when the guild investigated a complaint, they were also policing their own brand. The punishment of an individual member was a way of demonstrating to the public that the guild as a whole stood for quality and integrity. It was a brutal but effective form of public relations. The clerk finishes his writing. He rolls up the parchment, ties it with a bit of string, and places it in a designated box. The stonemason is thanked for his civic duty and sent on his way. His role in this drama is now over. He has lit the fuse. He has passed the responsibility to a higher power. For you, nothing has changed yet. You wake up the next morning, you feed your leaven in the comfortable illusion that your small compromise went unnoticed. You have no idea that your name is on a piece of parchment, sitting in a box in the guild hall, waiting to be read. The formal institutional memory of the guild is longer and more patient than a single angry customer, and it is about to turn its cold, analytical gaze directly upon you. A day passes. Then another. The incident with the stonemason and his substandard loaf begins to feel like a distant memory, a minor indiscretion that has dissolved into the past with no consequences. You fall back into the comforting rhythm of your work, the pre-dawn mixing, the morning bake, the noise of the market, the weary return home. Then, on the third day, in the middle of the afternoon, they arrive. You are in your shop kneading a batch of dough for the next morning, your hands and forearms dusted in white flour. The street outside is quiet. You hear the sound of footsteps stopping directly in front of your open counter, and you look up, expecting a customer. Instead, you see two men, and your heart, which was beating with the slow, steady rhythm of your work, gives a sudden, painful lurch. They are the guild masters. You recognize them instantly. One is an older man named Jean-Paul, with a face like a dried apple and small, shrewd eyes that seem to miss nothing. The other is younger, broader, a man named Robert whose own bakery is one of the largest and most successful in the city. They are not smiling. They are dressed in their finest robes, dark wool trimmed with fur, a stark contrast to your own simple, flour-dusted tunic. Their very presence in your humble shop is an event, and you know, with a sickening certainty, that it is not a social call. Master Baker, Jean-Paul says, his voice dry and raspy, like stones rubbing together. He doesn't use your name, just your title, and it feels less like a sign of respect and more like a formal accusation. We are here on guild business. An inspection. An inspection. The word hangs in the air heavy and metallic. Official inspections are not entirely unheard of, but they are rare. They are not random spot checks. They happen for a reason. And as you stand there, your hands frozen in the middle of a fold, you know exactly what that reason is. The stonemason. The pale, dense loaf. It wasn't ignored. It wasn't ignored. It has come back to you, embodied by these two grim-faced men. Of course, masters, you managed to say, your voice sounding thin and unfamiliar to your own ears. You wipe your furry hands on your apron, a nervous, useless gesture. Welcome. How can I assist you? We will assist ourselves, Robert says, his voice a low baritone. He doesn't wait for an invitation but ducks under the wooden counter, entering the small, sacred space of your bakery. Jean-Paul follows him. Suddenly, your shop feels incredibly small, crowded by their presence, by the weight of their authority. Their movements are deliberate and practiced. This is a ritual they have performed many times before. Robert walks directly to your sack of flour, untees the top, and plunges his hand deep inside. He brings out a handful, rubbing it between his thumb and forefinger, smelling it, even touching the tip of his tongue to it. He is checking for purity, for the presence of cheaper additives like bean flour or chopped dust, the implication that you would stoop to such crude forms of deception. While Robert inspects your raw ingredients, Jean-Paul turns his attention to your tools. He picks up the weights vials, turning them over in his palm. These small carved pieces of stone are supposed to be standardized and guild approved. He examines them for any signs of tampering, a hollowed-out bottom, a chip that might lighten them. He is searching for the petty, desperate tricks of a dishonest tradesman. The historical basis for this kind of inspection is incredibly strong. Guild records are filled with accounts of searchers or wardens who had the legal right to enter any member's workshop at any time to inspect their materials, tools, and finished products. His power was the bedrock of the guild's authority. It was a constant, dimming thread that kept craftsmen honest, or at least made them very careful about their dishonesty. The idea of a surprise inspection from a regulatory body is not a modern invention. It was a deeply ingrained reality for the medieval artisan. Scholars still debate how fairly this power was wielded. Was it always used to uphold standards, or could it be a tool for personal rivalries? Could a successful baker like Robert use his authority as a guild master to harass a smaller competitor, to find a small infraction and levy a heavy fine? The records are often silent on the motivations, leaving only the cold facts of the inspections and the punishments that followed. For you, in this moment, the academic question is irrelevant. You are at the complete mercy of these two men, and you can see in their cold, impersonal expressions that mercy is not on the agenda. You stand by your kneading table, feeling like a stranger in your own bakery. Every object you touch every day, every tool of your trade, is now being re-examined, re-evaluated, not as a familiar friend, but as a potential piece of evidence against you. The two men work in silence, their grim efficiency a performance in itself, designed to intimidate, to unnerve, and to remind you of your place in the unyielding hierarchy of the guild. After scrutinizing your raw materials and your tools, the guild masters turn their attention to the heart of the matter, your finished product. Jean-Paul walks over to the cooling rack where a few loaves from your morning bake are still sitting. These are your good loaves, the ones you made before the fatigue of the previous day had fully receded, the ones made with care and proper timing. You feel a flicker of hope. Surely, these will pass muster. They are perfect examples of your craft. Jean-Paul selects one, not at random, you feel, but with a deliberate eye. He holds it in his hands, his thumbs pressing into the crust, testing its crispness. He taps the bottom, listening for the hollow sound that indicates a good, airy bake. He brings it to his nose, inhaling deeply, searching for the complex, slightly sour scent of proper fermentation, and not the flat, yeasty smell of a rushed dough. Then he produces a small, sharp knife from a sheath on his belt. With a single, decises the loaf in half. The sound is a sharp crackle of crust followed by a soft tearing of the crumb. He holds the two halves up to the light coming through the window, examining the interior structure. This is the moment of truth. You watch, barely breathing, as his eyes scan the cut surface. He is reading the story of the bread. He can see the size and distribution of the air pockets, the color of the crumb, the thickness of the crust. It is a language he has spent a lifetime learning, and it is a language that cannot lie. He grunts, a non-committal sound that could mean anything. He hands one half to Robert, who also gives it a stern, analytical look. Next, they turn to the scales. Robert pulls out his own set of small, portable brass scales from another pouch. These are the official guild scales, meticulously calibrated and trusted. He places your stone 1 pound weight on one side of the scale. Then he places the loaf he is holding on the other. You watch as the brass arm of the balance wavers, dips, and finally settles. The side with the bread is slightly lower. Your loaf is a little over 1 pound. For a moment, a wave of relief so intense it makes you dizzy washes over you. They have found nothing wrong. Your flour is pure, your weights are true, your bread is of good quality and honest weight. This has all been a mistake, a misunderstanding. But Jean-Paul is not finished. He looks at you, his eyes cold. This is from this morning. Yes, master, you say, your voice steadier now, the first bake of the day. Do you have any bread left from yesterday afternoon? He asks, his tone casual, but you know it is a trap. The question is far too specific. Your heart sinks. There it is. They knew all along. The stonemason's complaint was not just about bad bread, it was specific. A loaf purchased in the late afternoon. You can't lie. Other merchants in the market would have seen you selling a second batch. A lie would only make things worse. I might have one. You mumble, your gaze dropping to the floor. One that did not sell. Show us, Robert commands. Slowly, reluctantly you walk to a small wooden bin where you keep bread for your own use. At the bottom, there is one last loaf from that rushed, regrettable batch. You knew it was substandard, so you hadn't even tried to sell it at a discount this morning. You had planned to eat it yourself, a private penance for your momentary lapse in quality. Now that private penance is about to become a piece of public evidence. You retrieve the loaf and hand it to Jean-Paul. The difference is immediately, painfully obvious. Held next to the beautiful brown, airy loaf from this morning, this one looks pale, sad, and squat. It feels heavier, denser. Jean-Paul doesn't even need to wait. He knows its sin is not its weight, but its very soul. He performs the same ritual with the knife, but this time the sound is different. There is no satisfying crackle of crust. The knife sinks into the loaf with a dull, heavy thud as if cutting through clay. When he pulls the two halves apart, the crumb inside is revealed. It is just as the stomachson must have described it, dense, gummy with a wet and a cooked patch near the bottom. It is an undeniable, indefensible failure. The historical accuracy of such a scene is striking. Guild regulations were often incredibly specific about the qualities of a finished product. For bakers, this included rules against selling bread that was dough-baked, undercooked, or misshapen. These weren't matters of taste, they were violations of the guild's code, as serious as using false weights. A loaf of bread was expected to be a work of art, a small, edible testament to the baker's skill and the guild's high standard. To present something like this for sale was an insult to the entire system. Jean-Paul places the two halves of the failed loaf on the counter, next to the two halves of the perfect one. The contrast is a silent, brutal judgment. Robert looks from the bread to you, his face a mask of stern disappointment. No one says a word for a long moment. The only sound in the small bakery is the faint buzzing of a fly near the window. In that silence, you feel the entire weight of your professional life, your reputation, and your future, crumbling like a poorly made crust. The silence in your small shop stretches, becoming heavier and more suffocating with each passing second. Jean-Paul, the older guild master, finally breaks it. He gestures with a bony finger towards the damning evidence on your counter, the two halves of the dense, pale loaf. This, he says, his voice flattened, devoid of any emotion, was offered for sale at full price yesterday. It is not a question. It is a statement of fact, an article in a charge sheet being read aloud. You can only nod, your throat suddenly too dry to form words. There is no defense to offer. You can't plead exhaustion or haste. The guild does not care about excuses. It cares about results. And the result of your work is lying there, bisected and exposed for all its flaws. The evidence is irrefutable. Your own baker's mark, the little sheaf of wheat, is faintly visible on the crust of the failed loaf. It is your signature on a confession. Robert, the younger, broader master, steps forward. You will come with us to the guild hall, he says. His tone is not harsh, but it carries an absolute authority that leaves no room for argument now. There is a grim finality to it. You are not being arrested by city guards. This is not a matter for the king's law. This is an internal affair, a matter for your professional kin, which in some ways is far more terrifying. You untie your flour-dusted apron, your movements slow and clumsy, as if your hands belong to someone else. You hang it on its customary peg, a simple, automatic gesture that feels strangely poignant, like you might not be doing it again for a very long time. You follow the two men out of your bakery and into the street. The afternoon sun feels unnaturally bright. The ordinary sounds of the city street, a distant dog barking, the clatter of a cart, seem distant and muted. It feels as though you are moving through a dream. You don't dare to look at curious eyes on you as you walk away from your shop, flanked by the two most powerful men in your profession. The walk to the guild hall is short, but it feels like a journey of 1,000 miles. When you arrive, you are not taken to the public clerk's office, but are led through a side door and up a narrow flight of wooden stairs to a small, wood-paneled room on the second floor. It is the guild's private meeting chamber. A long, heavy oak table dominates the space, surrounded by high-backed chairs. The room smells of old wood, beeswax, and the faint, dusty scent of parchment. You are told to stand at one end of the table. Jean-Paul and Robert take seats at the other end, joined by a third man, the guild's secretary, who has already appeared with a quill, an inkwot, and the official ledger. The proceeding begins immediately. There is no jury, no lawyer to speak for you. This is not a trial in a modern sense. It is a hearing, an inquest conducted by a body that is simultaneously your accuser, your judge, and your jury. This form of swift, internal justice was a hallmark of the guild system. Guilds had their own courts and their own legal privileges, often granted by a royal charter. They could levy fines, confiscate property, and most importantly, suspend or expel members from the trade. This legal autonomy was a jealously guarded power. Historians who study medieval law often point to guild courts as a crucial part of the legal landscape, a parallel system of justice that operated alongside the courts of the king and the church. For an artisan, a judgment from the guild court could be more devastating than one from a criminal court. A criminal might go to jail and then be released. A baker expelled from the guild had lost his entire identity and his means of survival. Jean-Paul states the charge that you did knowingly and willfully sell bread of a substandard quality, specifically bread that was dough-baked on dill made, thereby violating the sworn oaths of the guild and damaging its public reputation. The two halves of the offending loaf have been brought from your shop and are placed in the center of the great table. They are Exhibit A. You are asked if you have anything to say in your defense. The question is a formality. The evidence is overwhelming. What can you say? You try to explain. You talk of the long day, the rush, the simple mistake. Your words sound feeble and pathetic in the solemn, quiet room. The guildmasters listen with stony faces. They have heard it all before. The verdict is a foregone conclusion. After your short, stammering defense, the three men confer in low voices for no more than a minute. Then Jean-Paul looks at you, his expression unchanged. We find the charge to be proven, he declares. You have broken your oath. You have brought discredit upon your brothers. The guild must make an example of you, so that others may be reminded of their duty. The secretary dips his quill in the ink pot and begins to write in the ledger, his scratching pen the only sound in the room. He is recording your guilt, immortalizing your failure in the official history of the guild. The swiftness, the cold efficiency of it all is breathtaking. In the space of less than an hour, you have gone from being a respected master craftsman to a convicted cheat, and you still have no idea what your punishment will be. You stand before the long oak table, your hands trembling slightly, a cold dread pooling in your stomach. The verdict has been delivered, your guilt officially recorded in the guild's great ledger. Now all that remains is the sentence. You brace yourself for the expected punishment, or fine. A heavy one, no doubt. A sum of money that would take you months, perhaps even a year to pay off. It would be a crushing blow, but a survivable one. You could work harder, live more frugally, and eventually you would be clear of the debt. But Jean-Paul does not speak of money. He looks at you, a flicker of something that might be grim satisfaction in his old eyes, and he pronounces your fate. A fine is not sufficient for this offense, he says, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. This was a public cheat, and it requires a public penance. You have sold your failure to the people of this city. Now you will display it to them. He pauses, letting the weight of his words sink in. Tomorrow at midday, he continues, you will be taken to the market square. The loaf of your failure will be hung about your neck. You will be secured to the hurdle, and you will be drawn through the streets of the city for all to see, so that every citizen may know the consequences of bringing dishonor to the guild of bread makers. The words hit you with a physical force, knocking the air from your lungs. Not a fine. The saying, the hurdle, the thing you know in English as a sled, the punishment from the whispered stories, the dark fables told to frighten apprentices, the sentence of the baker in the neighboring town. You had thought of it as a horror story, something that happened to other people in other places. You never, in your darkest nightmares, imagined it would happen to you. This is a punishment designed not to deplete your purse, but to annihilate your soul. Its purpose is singular, humiliation. In your world, a person's reputation, their good name, is their single most valuable asset. It is more precious than coin or property. It is the invisible currency upon which all social and economic interactions are based. A man with a good name can get credit from a merchant, find a respectable spouse for his child, and be trusted by his neighbors. A man who has been publicly shamed has lost everything. He becomes a pariah, a walking symbol of disgrace. The choice of this specific punishment is a masterstroke of psychological cruelty, deeply rooted in the legal traditions of the time. The concept of mere punishment, or lex talient is an eye for an eye was often interpreted in a symbolic way. You didn't just punish the criminal, you made the punishment reflect the crime. A musician who played poorly might be made to parade through town wearing his instrument. A gossip might have her tongue symbolically bridled. He would be fused with the evidence of his failure, forced to wear it, to be dragged with it, to become one with it in the public imagination. Historians are fascinated by the sheer theatricality of these medieval punishments. They were not grim, hidden-away affairs. They were public spectacles carefully staged and performed for a mass audience. A punishment like yours was a piece of civic theatre with a clear moral. The stage was the city itself. The actors were you, the guild masters, and the entire populace. The script was unwritten, but everyone knew their part. You were to show shame. The authorities were to show righteous power. It was a ritual that reaffirmed the social order by making a vivid, unforgettable example of someone who had stepped outside of it. You are so stunned you cannot even speak. Your mind reels, trying to process the reality of what is about to happen. Being dragged through the streets, the jeering crowds, the rotten vegetables they would surely throw, the faces of your customers, your neighbors, the people you have known your whole life, twisted with mockery and contempt. It is a fate worse than a beating. A beating heals. This wound, the wound of public shame, would never fade. You are dismissed. Robert grabs your arm, his grip firm but not brutal, and leads you from the room. You are not taken to a city jail cell. The guild has its own methods. You are escorted to a small, windowless storage room in the cellar of the guild hall. The room smells of damp stone and rat droppings. He pushes you inside and bolts the heavy wooden door from the outside. You are left alone in the cold, oppressive darkness, with nothing but the echoing words of your sentence and the terrifying certainty of the dawn to come. The darkness in the cellar is absolute. It's a physical presence, a thick, cold blanket that presses in on you from all sides. You stumble forward, your hands outstretched, until you touch a damp stone wall. You slide down it, the rough surface scraping against your back, until you are sitting on the cold, earthen floor. There is nothing to measure the passage of time. No sliver of moonlight, no sound from the world above. There is only the frantic, chaotic rush of your own thoughts. The sentence repeats itself in your mind, over and over. The loaf of your failure will be hung about your neck. You will be secured to the hurdle. You will be drawn through the streets. Each phrase is a hammer blow, chipping away at the person you thought you were. You are a master baker, a respected craftsman. You own your own shop. You are a member of an honorable guild. These were the pillars of your identity, the solid ground beneath your feet. And in a single afternoon they have all been kicked away. Tomorrow you will not be a master baker, you will be a fool, a spectacle, a cautionary tale told to children. A deep, shuddering wave of regret washes over you. Why did you sell that loaf? Why didn't you just throw it away or eat it yourself? It was such a small thing, a moment of fatigue, a minor compromise. How could it lead to this? You try to trace the chain of events, from the tired kneading of the dough to the stonemason's angry face, to the cold eyes of the guild masters. It all seems both absurdly random and chillingly inevitable. You think about your shop. Who will feed your leaven in the morning? Who will fire the oven? The thought is almost comical in its mundane tragedy. The world will go on. Other bakers will be pulling their fragrant, perfect loaves from their ovens while you are being dragged through the mud. Your customers will simply go to the baker on the next street. Your absence will be a momentary inconvenience, and then you will be replaced. The city, the market, the guild, they are all systems far larger than you. They do not need you. And now they are casting you out. Sleep is impossible. Every time you start to drift into a state of hazy exhaustion, an image flashes in your mind and jerks you back to terrified wakefulness. You see the faces in the crowd, contorted with laughter and scorn. You feel the sting of a rotten apple hitting your cheek. You hear the rumble of the wooden sled over the cobblestones, a sound you know will be forever etched into your memory. The history of incarceration is long and complex, but your situation is a peculiar variant. You are not a prisoner of the state in the way a murderer or a thief might be. You're a prisoner of your own profession. This type of detention, where a guild or other corporate body held one of its own members, is a little documented but fascinating corner of legal history. Scholars who study such things suggest it was about maintaining control and preventing outside interference. By keeping you locked in their own cellar, the guild ensures you cannot flee, but they also keep the matter in the family. They are not surrendering their authority to the city guard. They are demonstrating that they police their own, from accusation to punishment. Hours pass, or perhaps it is only minutes. The cold from the floor seeps into your bones, and you begin to shiver, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that is born of both cold and fear. You try to pray, but the words feel hollow and useless. What can you ask for? A miracle. For the sun not to rise. At some point, a profound and terrifying shift happens in your mind. The frantic energy of panic and regret begins to burn itself out, leaving behind a strange, numb emptiness. The sheer scale of the impending disaster is too large for your mind to fully grasp. It's like trying to look directly at the sun. So your mind begins to shut down. You detach. You start to think of the man who will be tied to the sled tomorrow as someone else, a character in a play. You are no longer the protagonist of your own life, you are a spectator watching a tragedy unfold. This psychological distancing is a desperate act of self-preservation, a way to endure the unendurable. Then you hear it. A faint scraping sound from above. The sound of a bolt being drawn back. The heavy wooden door creaks open, and a rectangle of pale, grey light slices into the blackness, blinding you. A figure stands silhouetted in the doorway, holding a flickering torch. It is Robert, the guild master. His face is unreadable in the dancing light. It is time, he says, his voice echoing in the small, damp space. The dreaded dawn has arrived. You rise to your feet, your limbs stiff and aching from the cold, damp floor. You feel 100 years old. You follow Robert up the cellar stairs and into the main hall of the guild, where Jean-Paul is waiting. The early morning light streams through the high windows, the illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The room looks just as it did yesterday, but to you, it feels entirely different. It is no longer just a room, it is the antechamber to your humiliation. On the great oak table where yesterday your fate was decided, sits the instrument of your initial torture. It is the loaf, your failed loaf, but it has been prepared. Someone has drilled a rough hole through its center, near the top. Through this hole, a thick, greasy piece of rope has been threaded and tied into a loop. It looks like a grotesque, primitive medallion. Jean-Paul picks it up. The rope is long, designed to be a necklace. He approaches you, his expression as impassive as a stone carving. You stand frozen, your body rigid with a mixture of dread and resignation. You don't resist. You don't even flinch. You simply bow your head, a gesture of submission that is both expected and utterly soul-crushing. He slips the rope over your head. The loaf settles against your chest with a dull, heavy thud. It is surprisingly weighty, a solid, doughy mass of failure pressing against your sternum. The coarse rope chafes against the skin of your neck. You can smell it, the faint, disappointing scent of undercooked flour and your own professional ruin. This is the centerpiece of your costume for today's performance. It is the symbol that will explain your crime to the entire city, without a single word being spoken. This practice of forcing a transgressor to wear the symbol of their crime is a recurring theme in the history of public punishment. It's a form of living allegory, a way of turning a human being into a walking moral lesson. A poacher might be forced to wear the skin of a deer. A dishonest gambler might be made to wear a necklace of dice. Scholars of social history argue that in a largely illiterate society, these symbolic punishments were a powerful form of communication. They were instantly understandable, a visual shorthand for a complex legal and moral judgment. They bypassed the need for written laws or lengthy explanations, delivering their message with brutal, visceral clarity. And there is a peculiar, almost forgotten detail about these punishments that makes your situation even more specific. In some French towns, the rules for punishing bakers were codified with almost loving detail. The regulations might specify not only that the baker be dragged with his bad bread, but the exact size of the loaf to be hung on his neck, or even that he must be dragged from his own oven to the city gates and back. The level of ritualistic detail suggests that this was not an improvised act of mob justice, but a carefully orchestrated, unlegally sanctioned ceremony. With the necklace of your own failure now in place, Robert takes your arm again. He leads you out of the guild hall and into the morning sunlight. The city is awake and bustling now. People are on their way to work, to the market, church. As you all march through the streets, a few heads turn. People see the two stone-faced guild masters, and they see you, a man with a loaf of bread hanging from his neck. They know instantly what is happening. A murmur follows you, a ripple of whispers and pointing fingers. The news travels with the speed of gossip, an invisible fire spreading through the city's veins. A baker, caught cheating. They're taking him to the pillory. No, worse, the hurdle. By the time you reach the market square, a crowd will be waiting. They are being summoned by the sheer spectacle of your slow, silent march of shame. You keep your eyes fixed on the muddy ground in front of you, trying to block out the faces, the stares, the dawning comprehension in the eyes of people who, just yesterday, might have bought bread from you with a friendly smile. Each step is a lifetime. The weight of the loaf on your chest seems to grow heavier, not just a physical burden, but the crushing, metaphysical weight of every mistake you have ever made, all condensed into one pale, doughy lump. An example. Your slow march ends in the heart of the market square. The space has been cleared, creating a wide, open circle. And in the center of that circle, waiting for you, is the hurdle, the sled. It is a pathetic-looking thing, and that is part of its cruelty. It is not a grand instrument of torture, but a crude agricultural tool, repurposed for this moment of civic theater. It is nothing more than a few rough-hewn wooden planks hastily nailed to two runners, the wood grey and splintered from a life spent being dragged through muddied fields. It is a tool for hauling firewood or stones, not a vehicle for a human being. And that is precisely the point. You are being reduced to the level of cargo, an inanimate object of shame to be transported through the city. The crowd has grown. It seems the entire market has stopped to watch. Faces you know are in the throng, the fishmonger, the candle maker, other bakers from your guild who are watching with a mixture of pity and grim self-satisfaction. They are learning the lesson the guild masters intended. This is what happens when you fail. This is what happens when you get caught. Two city guards, looking profoundly bored by the whole affair, step forward. They are not the king's soldiers in shining armor, but glorified watchmen in simple leather jerkins. This is a routine part of their job. They grab you not roughly, but with an impersonal efficiency that is somehow worse. They force you to sit on the rough planks of the sled. The wood is coarse against the back of your legs, and you can feel a splinter snagging the fabric of your tunic. They begin to tie you down with thick, coarse rope. One rope goes around your chest, pinning your arms to your sides. Another goes around your legs. They pull the knots tight, ensuring you are completely immobilized. You are no longer a man, you are a parcel, securely wrapped for delivery. The loaf of bread on your chest presses painfully against your ribs, a constant, heavy reminder of the ridiculous, pathetic reason for this entire ordeal. This particular device, the hurdle or sled, has a dark and storied history. While you are here for bad bread, this same method of transport was often the first stage in the punishment for the most serious crime of all, high treason. Condemned traitors in England, for instance, were often tied to a hurdle and dragged by a horse to the place of their execution. Your crime is not treason against the king, but in the eyes of the guild and the community, it is a form of economic treason. You have betrayed the public trust. You have broken the sacred pact between maker and consumer. And so, you are given a punishment that echoes, but of the greatest criminals in the land, a way of signaling the gravity of your offense against the social order. As the guards finish their work, you notice something about the sled's construction. It's not just rough planks. Part of its frame is a section of wattle, a simple fence panel made of interwoven hazel branches. It's a repurposed piece of agricultural fencing. This is a strange and fascinating detail that historians sometimes uncover in old records. The instruments of public shaming were often not purpose-built. They were cobbled together from whatever was available, reinforcing the message that the offender was not even worthy of a specially crafted punishment. An old gate, a discarded plank, a piece of fence, Anything would do to drag a disgraced man through the dirt. You are now completely bound to the sled. You are lying on your back, staring up at the sky, a rectangle of blue framed by the leering, curious faces of the crowd. There is a final, terrifying pause. The guard falls into a hush of anticipation. In this moment, you are utterly helpless, the star of a play you never wished to be in. Historians still debate the true emphasis of this punishment. Was the physical discomfort of the journey the main point, the jarring and scraping of being dragged over uneven cobblestones and through muddy streets? Or was the journey itself merely a vehicle for the real punishment, the slow, relentless, and total annihilation of a person's public standing? As you lie there waiting for the first lurch, you suspect the answer is both. They intend to break your body and your spirit in equal measure. A guard picks up the long rope attached to the front of the sled, and you tense every muscle in your body, waiting for the pull. The pull comes. It's not a smooth acceleration. It's a sudden, violent lurch that snaps your head back against the rough planks. A collective gasp, a sort of appreciative ooh, ripples through the crowd. The performance has begun. Then comes the sound. A horrible, grinding, scraping noise as the wooden runners of the sled meet the uneven cobblestones of the market square. It's a sound that sets your teeth on edge, a sound of protest and friction. With every foot you are dragged, this grinding protest is the music of your humiliation. The physical sensation is just as jarring. You feel every single stone to the thin wood of the sled. Each one is a distinct, solid blow to your back and legs. Thump, scrape, jolt. It's a slow, agonizing rhythm of discomfort, a relentless reminder of your own helplessness. You are on your back, a captive audience to the sky. But your peripheral vision is filled with the world, turned upside down and passing by in a nauseating slide. You see the legs of the crowd shuffling to keep up, the underside of market stalls, the familiar gables and roofs of the surrounding buildings, all sliding by from a perspective you have never known. It's a dizzying, disorienting view that reinforces your new status. You are no longer a participant in the life of the city. You are something being dragged through its dirt. The initial hush of the crowd breaks, and the noise begins. It starts as a low murmur, a collective buzz of commentary and excitement. But as the procession gains momentum and leaves the central square, the murmur swells into a roar. The sound washes over you, a wave of human voices. It's too chaotic to pick out individual words at first, just the sheer volume of public contempt. Then, a new sound cuts through the din, a single, loud, official voice. Walking a few paces ahead of your sled is a man you now see as the town crier. He carries no bell today. He doesn't need one. Your slow, noisy progress is its own announcement. But he shouts at every intersection, his voice raw and powerful. Make way for the cheating baker, guilty of selling false bread. Let all honest folks see the price of deceit. His words are like salt in a wound. He is providing the official narrative, the script for your shame. He is ensuring that no one, not even a stranger just passing through the city, mistakes this for anything other than a formal, legal punishment. He is stripping you of any ambiguity, any possible sympathy. This procession, this slow drag, is not taking the quickest route. That is not its purpose. The route is deliberate, winding, and designed for maximum exposure. You are being paraded down the city's busiest thoroughfares, past the shops of other artisans, past the steps of the main church where people are gathered, past the windows of the wealthy and the doorways of the poor. The guild and the city authorities want everyone to see this. They are turning your personal failure into a citywide lesson. This was a common feature of such punishments. The route itself was a critical part of the sentence, a geography of shame. And the crowd follows. They are no longer just spectators, they are participants. They walk alongside the sled, a moving wall of scorn. Now you can hear the individual insults, sharp and cruel, hurled like stones. Thief. Look at his fine necklace. HED, steal the pennies from a dead man's eyes. Historians have long debated the true mindset of a medieval crowd at a public punishment. Were they a bloodthirsty mob, simply reveling in the cruelty and the excitement of the spectacle? Or did they see themselves as active participants in justice, upholding the moral standards of their community. Perhaps for most, it was a complex mixture of both. A genuine sense of outrage at your crime, combined with the undeniable, thrilling entertainment of seeing a man brought so low. It was a holiday from the monotony of their hard lives, a piece of high drama delivered to their doorstep, and you were the unwilling star. You pass the street of the other bakers. You see their shops, the familiar signs, the windows displaying their own honest, beautiful loads. You see their apprentices, and even a few of the masters, standing in their doorways to watch you pass. Their faces are a mixture of pity, fear, and a certain grim righteousness. They are your brothers in the guild, and they are watching you be ritually purged from their ranks. The grinding of the sled continues, pulling you ever onward, deeper into your nightmare. The shouted insults are a storm of noise, but up until now, they have been just that noise. Words that batter your spirit but leave your body untouched. Then the storm gains a physical form. It starts with a wet, heavy thud against your shoulder. For a split second, you don't understand what it is. It's not hard enough to be a stone, but it's solid. Then you feel a cold, slimy wetness seeping through your tunic, and the foul, sweet smell of decay fills your nostrils. You twist your head, just enough to see a brown, mushy stain spreading across the fabric. A roar of laughter erupts from the crowd, a direct hit. The thrower, a young boy with a grubby face, is slapped on the back by his friends. He has scored the first point in the game. And now that the game has begun, everyone wants to play. What follows is a barrage. A rain of the city's refuse, a downpour of its contempt. From the market's tolls you have just passed, the vendors and their customers now contribute to your misery. A handful of wilted cabbage leaves, soft and limp, slaps across your face. The slimy, discarded outer skins of onions stick to your hair. Someone throws a fish head, its eye a milky, dead orb that seems to stare at you as it slides off the loaf on your chest, leaving a trail of silvery scales and a lingering, wretched stench. You try to make yourself smaller to shrink into the sled, but it's impossible. You are a captive target, bound and exposed. You close your eyes, but you can't shut out the sounds, the wet splat of a mushy turnip hitting the wood next to your head, the jeers that follow every successful throw, the squelching sound of the filth that is accumulating around you. There is a strange and cruel logic to what is being thrown, a detail that future historians might miss. It's not just random garbage. It's symbolic. The Grenagos's apprentice is throwing the vegetables that have gone bad, the ones he couldn't sell. He is, in his own way, punishing you for failing at your own trade, for trying to sell a product that was not fit for consumption. The butcher's boy might throw a handful of bloody scraps, unfit even for the dogs. Each piece of refuse is a small, specific judgment, a professional critique delivered in the language of filth. You have polluted the market with your bad product, and now the market is polluting you in return. Historians still argue about this part of the ritual. Was this barrage of garbage an officially sanctioned element of the punishment, or was it simply tolerated mob behavior? The official sentence, as read by the town crier, likely never mentioned "and he shall be pelted with refuse." Yet, the guards who walk alongside your sled do nothing to stop it. They watch, their faces blank and uninterested. Their inaction is a form of permission. It's an unspoken understanding that the public has a role to play in this theater. They are not just the audience, they are the chorus, and their rotten vegetables are their lines. This was the community's chance to physically express its outrage, a messy, chaotic, but deeply felt act of collective justice. You feel a new sensation, mud. Someone has scooped up a handful of the thick, primordial muck from the street and flung it. It lands on your legs cold, gritty, and smelling of straw and animal waste. You are being covered layer by layer in the physical essence of the city's scorn. The loaf on your chest, your symbol of failure, is now stained and spattered, adorned with the vegetable entrails and filth of the market. The physical pain is minimal. A rotten apple doesn't break bones, but the psychological effect is devastating. With every splat, every stain, every foul smell, you are being stripped of your humanity. You are no longer a baker, a husband, a neighbor. You are a thing to be thrown at, a moving Donegal. The physical filth is intended to be an outward manifestation of the moral filth they believe you possess. They are making your outside match what they think is on your inside. The scraping sound of the sled changes as it moves from the hard cobblestones to the packed dirt of the central square. The journey, at least this part of it, is nearing its end. The barrage of garbage lessens as you move away from the market stalls, the source of the ammunition. A final, pathetic-looking carrot bounces off your leg, and then there is only the sound of the crowd, the town crier, and the grinding of the sled, pulling your filthy, stained, and utterly broken self back to where this all began. Hey! The grinding, scraping journey finally comes to a stop. The sudden silence is almost as jarring as the noise that preceded it. You have come full circle, ending up back in the market square. But you are not released. The guards unbind the ropes holding you to the sled, and for a moment, a foolish flicker of hope ignites within you. The hope is extinguished as quickly as it appeared. The guards haul you to your feet. Your legs are stiff and weak, and you stumble, nearly falling. They drag you, filthy and reeking, not towards freedom, but towards the final stage of your ordeal, the pillory. It's the same wooden structure you had watched the wine cellar in just a few days ago. The wine cellar whose fate you had observed with a kind of detached pity, never imagining it would soon be your own. Now up close, it seems larger, more menacing. The wood is dark with age and drain, and carved with the crude graffiti of generations of bored guards and defiant prisoners. The guards open the top plank. The two semicircular holes for the wrists and the larger one for the neck look like a grotesque wooden face, a silent, gaping mouth ready to swallow you. They force you to bend forward, shoving your head and hands into the designated slots. Your neck is pressed against the rough, splintery wood. Your hands are trapped, palms facing forward, in a gesture of supplication and helplessness. Then, the top plank is slammed shut and locked into place with a heavy iron pin. The sound of the pin sliding home is a sound of absolute finality. You are trapped. Your body is held in a stooped, uncomfortable posture that you will have to maintain for hours. You can't stand up straight. You can't sit down. You can't even properly turn your head to see the full extent of the crowd. You are fixed on display, a living statue of shame. This is the second act of the play. The first act was mobile, a parade of humiliation. This act is static. It is an exhibition. The purpose is no longer to show you to the city, but to allow the city to come and look at you, to scrutinize your face, to stare into your eyes, to observe your misery up close and at their leisure. The pillory or stocks is one of the most ancient and widespread forms of punishment, found in countless cultures across the globe. Its genius lies in its simplicity. It inflicts no direct physical injury, at least not in the way a whip or a brand does. Its torture is purely one of exposure, exhaustion, and psychological torment. Historians of crime and punishment see it as a perfect instrument of a society that values honor and reputation above all else. To be pilloried would eventually become a verb, a word meaning to be held up to public scorn and ridicule long after the wooden structures themselves had rotted away. Its power as a symbol was just that strong. There's a subtle and often overlooked aspect to the design of the pillory. It forces you to face the crowd. You cannot hide your face in your hands. You cannot turn away. You are compelled to witness your own shaming, to look upon the faces of your accusers, your judges, the ordinary people of your city. It creates an unbearable intimacy, a forced connection between you and the very community that is rejecting you. The crowd, which had been a moving, shouting entity, now settles. They form a semicircle around the platform. They are observers. Children point and laugh. Adults stand with their arms crossed, their faces a mixture of curiosity and stern judgment. They mutter to each other, retelling the story of your crime, shaking their heads in disapproval. Your personal failure has become a public lesson, a topic of conversation, a piece of civic entertainment for a dull afternoon. You are the subject of the sermon, and you have no choice but to listen. The sun begins to beat down on your exposed head and back, and you know, with a sinking heart, that the day is still very, very long. Time in the pillory moves differently. Seconds stretch into minutes, minutes into eternities. The sun crawls across the sky with agonizing slowness. Your initial feelings of terror and panic have burned away, leaving behind a dull, throbbing ache. It's an ache in your neck from the unnatural angle, in your shoulders from the weight of your hanging arms, and deep in your soul from the relentless, soul-crushing boredom of public shame. You have become part of the market's landscape. People come and go. Some stare for a long time, others give you a passing glance and then turn their attention back to a plump chicken or a bolt of cloth. You are no more interesting than a fountain or a stray dog. This, in a way, is even more humiliating than the earlier active mockery. You are not even worthy of sustained contempt. You are just there. Then a new smell assaults your senses, a stench so powerful, it momentarily distracts you from your own misery. It is the foul, unmistakable odor of rotting fish. It grows stronger and stronger, and then you hear a commotion as the guards return to the pillory, dragging another unfortunate soul with them. They unlock the stocks, and for a glorious, fleeting moment your hands and head are free. You try to straighten up, but your muscles scream in protest. Before you can even begin to savor the relief, the guards are shoving a new prisoner into the space beside you. He is the fishmonger. Ayman you know by sight, the burly fellow with the perpetual scowl. His crime is as classic and predictable as your own. He was caught trying to sell fish that were a day, or perhaps two, past their prime. Fish that had begun to turn, their eyes clouded, their gills a sickly pale brown. His punishment mirrors yours in its symbolic cruelty. Around his neck, on a rope just like yours, hangs the evidence of his crime, two large decomposing fish, tied together by their tails. The source of the horrific smell is now hanging just a few feet from your face. The guards slam the wooden plank shut again, and now you are locked in with a companion. You are a matched set. The cheating baker and the dishonest fishmonger. Side by side, you are a complete tableau of market fraud, a living exhibit for the edification of the public. This practice of putting multiple offenders in the same pillory was common. It was efficient, of course, but it also served a theatrical purpose. It created a little community of the shamed, forcing transgressors to endure their punishment in the close, unwelcome company of their peers in disgrace. It prevented the prisoner from retreating into a solitary world of misery and forced a kind of grotesque social interaction. There's a strange and little-known element to the social dynamics of the pillory. While the crowd's reaction was often one of scorn, there are historical accounts of friends or family of the prisoner attempting to offer them a drink of water or to shield them from the sun. Such acts of kindness were often forbidden by the guards, as they were seen as interfering with the course of justice. Conversely, if the prisoner's crime was particularly hated, like hoarding grain during a famine, the crowd's behavior could escalate from throwing garbage to actual physical violence, sometimes with tragic results. Your crime and the fishmongers are contemptible, but they are not in that category. You are fools to be mocked, not monsters to be destroyed. You and the fishmonger do not speak. What is there to say? You are both members of the same club, initiated through the same ritual of public disgrace. You can hear his heavy, ragged breathing. You can smell the sweat of his fear mingling with the putrid aroma of his decaying wares. The smell is almost unbearable. It's a thick, oily, sweetish stench that coats the back of your throat and makes your eyes water. You try to breathe through your mouth, but it doesn't help. With its pathetic, floury smell, is completely overwhelmed by the powerful perfume of rotting cod. You are now locked in a personal multisensory hell. Your body aches, your spirit is crushed, and your nose is being subjected to a form of torture all its own. You look at the fishmonger. His eyes are closed, his face a mask of stoic misery. He is enduring, and you know that you must do the same. You are partners in this dance, and all you can do is wait for the music to finally stop. The sun, which had seemed frozen in the sky, finally begins its descent. Its light softens from a harsh, white glare to a gentler, golden hue. The shadows of the market stalls stretched long and dark across the square. The crowds begin to thin, the noise of commerce replaced by the weary sounds of a city packing up for the day. Your ordeal, you sense, is nearing its end. Finally, just as the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the rooftops, the guards return. They carry a large iron key, and the sound of its scraping in the lock of the pillory is the sweetest music you have ever heard. With a groan of old wood, The top plank is lifted. Freedom is not a rush of euphoria. It is a slow, agonizing wave of pain. As you pull your head and hands free, 1,000 fiery needles seem to prickle your skin as the blood rushes back into your constricted limbs. You try to straighten your back, and a spasm of agony shoots through your spine. You are a crooked, aching parody of a man. The guards cut the rope from around your neck. The loaf of bread, your companion in shame for the entire day, falls to the wooden platform with a dull thud. It lies there, a filthy, garbage-stained lump, and you feel a strange sense of detachment from it, as if it belongs to someone else's story. The fishmonger is also released, his own foul necklace cut from him. He doesn't look at you. He doesn't look at you. He just stumbles away from the pillory, melting into the twilight shadows without a word. You are not formally dismissed. The guards just turn and walk away. Your sentence has been served. You are free to go. But where? You take a tentative step off the platform. Your legs tremble, unsteady after hours of being locked in one position. The few remaining people in the square watch you, their expressions no longer mocking, but filled with a kind of weary, detached curiosity. They are watching to see what the broken thing will do next. You begin the long, silent walk home. Every step is an effort. Your body aches with a deep, bouts more profound than any you have ever known from a day of honest labor. But the physical pain is nothing compared to the emptiness inside you. The streets are quiet now, cloaked in the soft, forgiving darkness of evening. Here and there, a candle or a lantern glows in a window, casting warm, yellow rectangles onto the street. You keep to the shadows, pulling your filthy, reeking tunic close around you, trying to make yourself invisible. This walk home is a journey through a landscape that is both familiar and alien. These are the streets you have walked 1,000 times, but tonight they feel different. You are seeing them through new eyes, the eyes of a shamed man. You feel like a ghost, haunting the edges of a world you no longer belong to. There's a historical concept known as civil death, where a person, though still physically alive, is stripped of their legal rights and social standing. They can no longer own property, sign a contract, or testify in court. While your punishment was not a formal declaration of civil death, it has resulted in a social one. You have been ritually expelled from the community of the respectable. This walk home is your first experience of this new spectral existence. You see a group of men outside a tavern, their faces ruddy in the light spilling from the open door. You recognize one of them as a fellow merchant. As you approach, he sees you. His laughter dies in his throat. He nudges his companion, and they both turn to stare. They don't have to. Their sudden silence, their wide-eyed stares are more dumbing than any insult. You lower your head and hurry past, the invisible brand of your shame burning on your forehead. Finally, you arrive at your own street, your own shop. The wooden shutter is closed over the serving window. The door is shut. It looks just as you left it, but it feels like a lifetime ago. You fumble with the iron key, your stiff, clumsy fingers struggling to fit it into the lock. The lock turns, the door creaks open, and you slip inside, into the deep, welcoming blackness of your own home. You lean back against the door, bolt it shut, and for the first time since this nightmare began, you are finally, truly alone. The silence of the room is absolute, a stark contrast to the noise and fury of the day. But it is not a peaceful silence. It is the silence of a tomb. You stand in the darkness of your shop for a long time, not moving, just breathing. The familiar smells of the room, cool stone, old flour, the faint sartang of the dormant leaven, should be comforting, but tonight they feel alien. This place, which was once the center of your world, your source of pride and purpose, now feels tainted. It feels like the scene of a crime. Eventually, you light a single candle. The small flame pushes back the darkness, revealing the room in all its mundane familiarity. The kneading table, the sacks of flour, the cold, silent oven. Everything is exactly as you left it. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a pail of water. You barely recognize the face staring back at you. It is streaked with dirt and grime. Your hair is matted with filth. There is a dark bruise on your cheek where a piece of fruit must have hit you. But it's the eyes that are the most different. They are hollow, haunted, a stranger's eyes looking out from your own face. Slowly, mechanically, you begin the process of cleaning yourself. You strip off your tunic, a disgusting, stained rag that you roll into a ball and shove into the coldest corner of the hearth, wanting to burn it, to obliterate the evidence of your day. You wash yourself with cold water from the bucket, scrubbing at your skin until it is raw, trying to remove not just the physical dirt, but the invisible stain of public contempt. It's a futile, ritualistic act. The filth that is seeped inside, into your sense of self, feels permanent. Once you are clean, you sit on the edge of your narrow bed, wrapped in a coarse blanket. The physical exhaustion is immense, but sleep feels a universe away. Your mind is a relentless tormentor, replaying the events of the day in a looping, vivid montage. The grinding of the sled, the jeering faces, the wet splat of garbage, the heavy, suffocating weight of the pillory. It is in this moment of quiet despair that the true nature of your punishment finally becomes clear. The guildmasters, in their cold wisdom, did not just punish you for a day. They have inflicted a wound that will bleed for the rest of your life. They have destroyed your reputation, and in doing so, they have destroyed your business. A baker does not sell just bread. He sells trust. People buy from him every single day. They invite his product into their homes. They put it on their tables. They feed it to their children. That entire relationship is built on the belief that the baker is an honest man, a skilled craftsman who can be relied upon. Who will trust you now? Who will want to buy bread from the man they saw dragged through the streets like a traitor, pelted with refuse, and locked in the stocks? Your baker's mark, the little sheaf of wheat, was once a symbol of your pride and skill. Now it is a mark of infamy. Anyone who sees it will be reminded of your disgrace. It has been transformed from a guarantee of quality into a warning label. This concept of social capital, the value of a good reputation and a network of trust, is something modern economists talk about. But it was a visceral, life-or-death reality for the medieval artisan. In a world with no formal advertising, no brands in the modern sense, your name was your entire marketing strategy. And yours is now, quite literally, mud. There's a subtle ongoing debate among historians about the long-term effects of such public shaming. Did it work? Did a shamed craftsman simply close his shop and disappear, or was there a path to redemption? The records are often frustratingly silent on this point. They meticulously record the crime and the punishment, but rarely follow the individual's life afterward. Some scholars suggest that a person might move to a new town where they were not known and try to start again. Others argue that in a world where travel was difficult and people were deeply tied to their communities, such a fresh start was nearly impossible. You were stuck with your reputation, for better or for worse. You lie back on your bed and stare into the darkness. You realize that the punishment isn't over. Yesterday was just the beginning. The true sentence is not a single day of pain and humiliation. The true sentence is a lifetime of whispers, of averted gazes, of suspicious customers. The true sentence begins tomorrow, when you have to decide whether you can even bear to open the shutter of your shop and face the world again. Morning arrives, not with a gentle dawn, but as a stark grey inevitability. For the first time in your adult life, the smell of yeast in your shop does not stir you to action. The living leaven, your faithful partner in creation, waits to be fed, but you cannot bring yourself to move. The familiar rhythms of your craft, once a source of comfort and purpose, now seem like a cruel mockery. What is the point of baking bread that no one will buy? Hours pass. You hear the city waking up outside your walls, the sounds of carts of voices of life going on without you. The sounds that were once the backdrop to your own busy morning now feel like they are from another world, a world you have been exiled from. Finally, driven by a flicker of defiance, or perhaps just the sheer force of habit, you rise. You feed the leaven. You mix a small batch of dough, your movements slow and joyless. You fire the oven. You shape the loaves. You do all the things a baker does, but you feel like an imposter, an actor playing a role he no longer believes in. When the bread is baked, and it is good bread, ironically, some of the most careful, technically perfect bread you have ever made, you face the moment you have been dreading, opening the shop. You take a deep breath, walk to the front of the shop and push open the heavy wooden shutter that forms your counter. You prop it up and step back, half hidden in the shadows of the room, bracing yourself. The street is not empty, but it is not filled with a jeering mob either. The reaction is quieter and in many ways more chilling. People who would normally walk on your side of the street now cross to the other side, their gazes deliberately averted. They find a sudden, intense interest in the sky, in their own shoes, in anything but your open window. They are not being cruel, not actively. They are simply erasing you. They are treating your shop as a void, a place that is no longer there. A woman you have known for years, a regular customer who always had a kind word and a bit of local gossip, approaches. For a hopeful second, you think she's going to stop. Your eyes meet, and in her face you see a flash of pity followed by a flicker of deep, profound awkwardness. She doesn't know what to say. The normal, easy transaction between you is now impossible. Frightened with the heavy memory of yesterday's spectacle, she gives you a tight, sad little smile and hurries on, leaving you in a bubble of suffocating silence. One person does stop. A young boy, no more than 7 or 8, who points a grubby finger at you and shouts to his mother, "Look. It's the bread man. The one they put the fish on." His mother, mortified, shushes him, grabs his hand, and practically yanks him down the street, casting a horrified, apologetic glance back at you. The child wasn't being malicious. He was just stating a fact. You are no longer the baker. You are the one they put the fish on, a story, a piece of street theater, a character in a local drama. The fish wasn't even your punishment, but in the confused memory of a child, your disgrace has merged with the fishmonger's. It's all just one big story of shame. This is the long tale of public humiliation. The formal punishment is over, but the informal, social punishment continues, enforced not by guards and pillories, but by the subtle, collective power of the community. It's a form of shunning, a quiet, civil ostracism. Historians and sociologists call this the power of informal social control. In a close-knit community, the fear of being ostracized, of being on the receiving end of this silent, collective disapproval, is often a more powerful deterrent than the fear of formal legal punishment. You are experiencing this power in its most potent form. An academic question that has long been debated is whether a merchant in your position could ever truly recover. Some historical records show shamed individuals continuing to trade, suggesting that, over time, the memory of the punishment might fade and economic necessity might trump social stigma. Perhaps a customer who cannot afford the prices of another baker might eventually, reluctantly return to your stall. But it would be a long, slow, and humiliating process of rebuilding trust from absolute zero. Recovery, if it was possible at all, would be measured in years, not days. You stand at your counter for an hour, 2 hours. Not a single person approaches. Not one coin is offered. Your beautiful, perfect loaves, a testament to the skill you still possess, sit untouched, their warm, enticing scent wafting into a street that refuses to acknowledge them. The silence is your new sentence. The averted eyes are your new pillory, and the unsold bread is the tangible, heartbreaking proof of your ruin. As you stand in the crushing silence of your ignored shop, a new shadow falls across your counter. You look up, expecting another neighbor to hurry past, but this figure stops. It is the guild's clerk, the same man who first recorded the stonemason's complaint. He is not here to buy bread. He carries a ledger and a small leather coin pouch. "Master Baker," he says, his voice devoid of any sympathy, "I am here on the matter of the fines." You stare at him, confused. "The fines? I thought the punishment." The clerk allows himself a small, thin smile. It does not reach his eyes. "The spectacle of yesterday was for the public," he explains, as if to a slow-witted child. "It was to satisfy the honor of the community. The fines are for the guild. They are to satisfy the honor of your craft, and to cover the expenses of the proceeding." He opens his ledger and runs a finger down a column of neat, spiddery script. First, he begins, "There is the fine for the primary offense, selling bread of a substandard and fraudulent nature. The guild sets this at 20 shillings. 20 shillings. The amount is staggering. It is more money than you might see in half a year. It is a sum that could buy a good milk cow or rent a small cottage for a year. A wave of nausea washes over you. But he is not finished. Second, he continues, his voice a relentless drone, there is the matter of the costs incurred by the guild in the execution of your sentence. The time of the honorable guild masters who conducted the inspection. The time of the city guards who administered the punishment. The fee for the town crier who announced your crime, and a small charge for the use and maintenance of the civic hurdle and pillory. He pauses, as if enjoying the dramatic effect. The total for these expenses comes to 5 shillings. 5 shillings. For the men who shamed you, for the sled that scraped your back, for the pillory that held your head. You are being charged for your own humiliation. You are being presented with a bill for your own destruction. This practice, as outrageous as it sounds, was horrifically common. The legal systems of the past were often designed to be self-funding. The costs of justice were frequently passed on to the convicted. Jailers charged prisoners for their food and lodging. Executioners billed the family of the condemned for their services. From the perspective of the authorities, this made perfect sense. Why should the public purse or the guild's treasury be depleted by the actions of a criminal? The offender created the problem. The offender should pay to resolve it. Historians who study the economics of medieval law find these kinds of justice fees everywhere. They reveal a system where punishment was not just a moral or social act, but also a financial transaction. Fines were a significant source of income for guilds, for feudal lords, and for kings. There is a cynical but persistent scholarly argument that many laws and regulations were enforced with particular zeal not just to maintain order, but because it was profitable to do so. Whether this was the primary motive is still debated, but the financial dimension of justice is undeniable. So the total owed to the guild, the clerk concludes, snapping his ledger shut, is 25 shillings. The guild requires payment within 1 month. 25 shillings. He might as well have asked for the moon. With your business in ruins, with no customers and no income, the sum is an impossibility. You have a few coins saved, tucked away in a loose stone behind the hearth, but it is a pittance, not even a tenth of what you now owe. Failure to pay will have its own consequences. The guild has the authority to seize your property. They can take your tools, your supplies, your furniture. They can and will take this very shop, the small building that is both your home and your livelihood, and sell it to another baker to cover your debt. You look at the clerk, at his impassive face, and you finally understand the full, perfect, crushing architecture of the system. The public humiliation was designed to destroy your ability to earn a living, and the fine impossible to pay without that living is designed to take everything else you have left. It is a 2-stage process of annihilation, one social, the other economic. They have left you with nothing, not even hope. The clerk makes a final note in his ledger, turns, and walks away, leaving you alone with the ghost of your future and the crushing, impossible weight of a debt you can never repay. You are left standing in the ruins of your life, a man undone by a single, substandard loaf of bread. The silence of your shop is no longer just empty. It is mocking. The whole elaborate, brutal ritual you endured now seems both insane and possessed of a terrifyingly clear logic. Why? Why was the punishment so theatrical, so personal, so utterly devastating? The answer lies in the very structure of the world you inhabit, in a time before mass media, before national brands, before centralized government agencies that inspect food production on an industrial scale. The system of trust was local, personal, and fragile. The entire economy of the city, the well-being of its people, rested on a web of individual promises. When you stamped your mark on a loaf, you were making a personal promise to every citizen. This is good. This is honest. Your crime was not just selling a bad product. It was breaking that promise. It was a tear in the delicate fabric of social and economic trust. If a baker could sell a false loaf, why not a weaver who sells cloth that unravels? Or a mason who uses wheat mortar? Or a wine seller who waters his wine? If one thread is pulled, the entire tapestry could come undone. Your small act of carelessness was seen as an attack on the entire system. And so the system's response had to be more than a simple penalty. It had to be a powerful, unforgettable reaffirmation of the rules. The logic of ritual humiliation was, in its own brutal way, a form of mass communication. The spectacle served three distinct purposes. First, it was a deterrent. Every other artisan in the city who saw you dragged through the streets, who saw your misery in the pillory, received a clear and visceral message. The thought, that could be me, was a far more powerful check on their own behavior than any written rule in a dusty guild ledger. It was a lesson taught not with ink, but with mud, rotten fruit, and the soul-crushing weight of public scorn. Second, it was a form of public reassurance. By punishing you so visibly and so harshly, the guild and the city authorities were sending a message to the general populace. They were saying, "We are on your side. We will not tolerate fraud. The system that protects you. The consumer is strong and it is working." The punishment of one baker was a dramatic advertisement for the integrity of all the other bakers. It was a way of restoring the trust. Your personal destruction was a sacrifice made for the greater good of the market stability. And third, it was a form of communal catharsis. Your crime, however small, was an insult to the community. You had disrespected them. The public punishment was a chance for the people to express their collective anger, to participate directly in the act of justice. Their jeers, their insults, their thrown garbage, these were not just random acts of cruelty. They were a ritualized, communal expression of moral outrage. The community purged itself of the anger your transgression had created, and in doing so reaffirmed its own shared values. Historians and sociologists who study these rituals often refer to them as ceremonies of degradation. They are the opposite of ceremonies like a knighthood or a coronation, which elevate an individual's status. A degradation ceremony is designed to publicly and formally strip an individual of their status and identity, and to cast them out of the respectable community. The process you endured was a textbook example, a formal accusation, a public denunciation of your actions by the town crier, and a symbolic separation from your peers, leaving you isolated and defined as a cheat. There is a long-standing debate about the effectiveness of shame as a social tool. Does it reform the offender, or does it simply harden them or destroy them completely? In your case, there seems to be little thought of your personal reform. The goal was not to make you a better baker. The goal was to use your example to make sure no other baker would ever dare to make the same mistake. You were not the patient to be cured. You were the diseased limb to be amputated publicly, for the health of the body politic. You look at the perfect, unsold loaves on your counter. You look at the cold oven. You look at the empty street. You understand now the cold, brutal, and deeply rational logic of the machine that has crushed you. You were not punished for being a bad baker. You were punished to remind everyone else what it meant to be a good one. Years begin to pass, not for you, but for the world. You, the baker with the necklace of shame, become a ghost, a story that fades from memory into legend, and then into the dusty silence of forgotten records. The world moves on, and with it, the very idea of justice begins to shift. The bizarre, theatrical punishments of your time, the pillory, the hurdle, the symbolic necklaces of failure, start to seem less like righteous justice and more like chaotic, barbaric spectacles. A new way of thinking is slowly dawning. Philosophers and legal reformers begin to argue that punishment should be rational, proportional, and, most importantly, private. The goal, they argue, should not be to shame a person in the public square, but to reform them, or at least to contain them, within the walls of a prison. The decline of the guilds plays a huge part in this transformation. As economies grow larger and more complex, as trade expands beyond the city walls, the old guild system begins to break down. It is seen as restrictive, old-fashioned, an impediment to free trade and industrial innovation. With the waning power of the guilds, their ability to police their own members with such intermittent absolute authority fades as well. The state, with its centralized courts, its professional police forces, and its formal legal codes, slowly takes over the business of justice. A baker who sells bad bread is no longer a matter for the guild masters, it is a matter for a government health inspector. And so, your punishment becomes a relic. The pillories are dismantled. They were used for firewood. The hurdles are returned to the farmers' fields. The idea of dragging a man through the streets for an economic crime becomes unthinkable, a strange and cruel anecdote from a less enlightened time. The problem of bad bread, however, does not disappear. People will always be tempted to cut corners, to stretch a product, to make a dishonest profit, but the methods of dealing with it are transformed. In place of public shaming, a new system of anonymous, bureaucratic regulation emerges. Inspectors now arrive at a bakery unannounced, but they are armed not with righteous fury, but with clipboards and scientific instruments. They don't check flour by tasting it, they take samples to a laboratory to test for impurities. They don't just weigh a loaf on a brass scale, they check for compliance with complex labeling laws and nutritional standards. The punishment for an infraction is no longer a day of public agony, but a neatly typed letter informing you of a fine, a notice of violation, or, in the most extreme cases, a court summons. The shame is privatized, reduced to a matter of paperwork and financial penalties. Historians still debate whether this transition was entirely for the better. We have certainly lost the raw cruelty of the old system. But have we also lost something of its power? Does a quiet, impersonal fine, often seen as just a cost of doing business, carry the same moral weight as the searing, unforgettable experience of public disgrace? Does it deter others in the same way? It is a question without an easy answer. The system has become more humane, but perhaps also more impersonal. Its moral lessons hidden away in the dry language of legal codes, rather than being performed in the vivid, brutal theater of the street. The world that punished you with such theatrical ferocity has vanished, replaced by a world you would barely recognize. A world of consumer protection agencies, of health and safety regulations, of anonymous online reviews that can destroy a business more thoroughly than any pillory. The ghost of your experience, however, lingers in the language. People are still pilloried in the press. A failed politician is dragged through the mud. The instruments of your torture have become metaphors, their physical reality forgotten, but their power to describe public shame remains. From the quiet vantage point of a distant future, your story seems both alien and strangely familiar. The details have changed, the methods have been refined, but the fundamental tension remains the same, the struggle to maintain trust in the marketplace, and the question of how society should deal with those who break that trust. Your ordeal, which felt so personal, so specific, was just one small, brutal chapter in that long and ongoing story, and so the story of the baker and the world that made him comes to a gentle close. The echoes of the crowd have faded, the grinding of the sled has fallen silent, and all that is left is the deep, quiet peace of the night. You can let the story drift away now, like a leaf on a slow-moving stream, carrying with it all onto. There is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to figure out. There is only the feeling of comfort, the gentle weight of your blankets, and the soft, steady rhythm of your own breathing. The path we walked together tonight was a winding one, leading through the dusty streets of a world long gone. But that journey is over, and now you find yourself in a place of perfect stillness, a safe and quiet harbor where you can rest. Allow your mind to become as quiet as the baker's shop after the door was bolted shut. But this is not a silence of despair, it is a silence of peace, a silence of peace, a silence of release. Feel any remaining tension in your body begin to melt away, from the tips of your toes to the muscles in your face. Let it all go. Let it all become soft. You are drifting now gently, effortlessly on the soft deep waters of approaching sleep. The story now rests. If you find you need a little more time, there are other gentle journeys waiting on the channel. Otherwise, simply allow the silence to carry you into sleep. Good night.